Hey guys, welcome back to my channel, Mommy Loves to Read. I'm Olivia and thank you for joining me today. So today I'm here to do my November wrap up and talk to you guys about all the books I read in the month of November. And if you didn't hear me, I said November. Can you guys believe this year is like flying by? It's almost done. So here we go. So I checked my Goodreads right before I started and I read a total of 6 books this month, which I didn't even realize I read that much, but I guess I did. So it was a good reading month. I feel like any month you read a book is a good month, whether you read 1 book or 20 books. So I have actually all the books with me that I read this month except 1 book. So I'm going to go ahead and start with that book. And then if I can remember, I will insert a picture of this book and then we will go from there. I'm going to try to not be too long-winded in this video. I tend to talk and then I always have a story behind why I picked the book I picked. So then my videos wind up being like forever and a day long. So without further ado, here we go with my November wrap up. So the first book that I read this month, which I actually started it like the last day of October, but I finished it like the first week of November, so we're gonna go ahead and count it because I finished it in November, is Three Women by Alicia D, and that book was really good. I was inspired to read that book. I cannot think of her channel, but if I do, I will link it down below. Another wonderful lady that I was watching on YouTube got the book and she kind of gave a brief overview of what the book was about, and I was like, oh, that sounds really interesting. So I put it on hold at my library. I actually forgot I put it on hold. That's how long it took me to get it, and then it came through. And so when it came through, I was like, oh, I need to read it. And so this book pretty much follows 3 women, hence the title. There's Maggie, there's Sloan, and there's, why can't I think of the last woman? Maggie, Sloan, and another lady. Oh gosh, I can't think of her name. But anyways, it's 3 women and you're pretty much following their lives and kind of like their sexuality and how they're dealing with it. And it kind of starts off for each of them, not really childhood, in their teen years, and follows them all the way up into adulthood. And so you're kind of just following like their journey as they're dealing with their sexuality, kind of come to terms with things that have happened to them in their life, and then also how they feel about these things. Hold on, camera malfunction. So I don't know how much of that it got. So pretty much like I was saying, you're following these 3 women and it's following their journey and their sexuality all the way from like teen to adulthood, and kind of following their journeys and how they're dealing with what their sexuality means, like all the different aspects. You have one girl, Maggie, she had a relationship with 2 older men when she was underage. You have Sloan, who her and her husband are like swingers, so they bring other people into the bedroom, into their relationships, and how that kind of works. And then the other lady, which, oh god, I can't think of her name, that's gonna bother me. Watch, I'm gonna think of it like when I'm going to bed tonight. It's gonna pop in my head. But anyways, she is in a marriage that she's not really happy in. Her husband is not very loving. He doesn't really show any affection. So she goes out and she finds someone who is doing that for her. And so you're kind of following each of their journeys. And the one thing that I like about this book is, one, it's written about a woman. A lot of times written by a woman. I feel like a lot of times when you read books about women and sexuality, it's written by a man. So you have this man coming and telling you about women, but I really like this book that it was written from a woman's point of view, and it was written in a style where they weren't it wasn't making the women seem like a bad person. Like, it was never like, oh, you have these underage relationships, you're terrible, you should feel bad, or you're having an affair, you're a terrible woman. It was just kind of like giving you their story, showing you what they were dealing with, and leaving it there so you as the reader could kind of make your own assumptions and your own thoughts and opinions and ideas about the 3 women. So if you haven't read that book, it's a really good book, and it's not a super long book, and I really did enjoy it. I gave that book like a 5 out of 5 stars, so that's really good. The next book that I read this month is this book by Gabourey Sidibe. It is called This Is Just My Face, Try Not to Stare, and this is a memoir. I didn't actually participate in Nonfiction November, but this book does fall under Nonfiction November, so here you go. This book was a memoir by Gabourey Sidibe. I didn't know much about this book going into it. I read Well Read Black Girl earlier this year, and I really liked her story in there. That was my favorite one out of all the stories in there. I really loved her. Something about the way it was written just like stuck with me. And so when I found out she had a memoir, I was like, okay, I need to get it. Once again, put on hold in my library. It came through, and so we read it. And this right here, if you're not someone who loves memoirs, you should go ahead and pick this up. Her style of writing is like, I feel like I'm talking to a girlfriend, like I'm sitting on her couch on a Friday night with a glass of wine, and we're just like talking about our week and what we went through and all those things. It's just so laid back and so real, and I like just hearing her story, the way she tells it. When I finished this book, I had the biggest smile on my face because it was just like a good read. So like I said, if you're looking for a good read, go ahead and check this out. I give this book a 5 out of 5 stars, and it was a fairly short book too. That made it easy to read too. It's only 240 pages. So yeah, go ahead and check that out. The next book I read is by Jacqueline Woodson. So I love Jacqueline Woodson books. I don't know what she does, how she does. She just like sprinkles a little magic into each of her books, and they're all so good, but they're so short. So once again, this is a Jacqueline Woodson book. I just happened to find this at my library, and it's called The House You Pass on the Way. Once again, it's a Jacqueline Woodson book, so it's really short. It's 194 pages. I read this in a day. In this book, you're following a young girl and like her journey. She is in 8th grade, so she's the summer of her 8th grade year going into high school, and she is once again grappling with like her sexuality. She doesn't really know who she is. She thinks she's into girls, but she's not really sure, and her cousin kind of comes down to visit her. And her cousin is kind of dealing with the same thing. The cousin is actually sent down to visit her because her parents want to fix her over the summer. And so they're kind of both this coming of age tale of them grappling with their sexuality, trying to figure out who they are as young women and how this is going to affect them throughout their life. And it's written, oh gosh, I don't know what year this is. They're not, I don't know. I want to say maybe they're like in the 50s or the 60s. I really don't know. But it's not written like in the now. It's not like they're like in 2019 or anything. So it's just very interesting, them grappling with like, what does this mean to be different and how this is going to affect us throughout our life. So if you haven't checked this book out, go ahead. I feel like any book by Jacqueline Woodson is a must read. And once again, this one was like a 5-star, and it is a wide book. So yes. The next book that I read this month is The Water Dancer by Ta-Nehisi Coates. And this book was amazing. It did take me a little bit to read, only because I like started it. It was getting to like a really big part, and I was like, I'm not ready yet. Hold on, let me put this book down. So I put it down. I read another book, and then I picked it up like a week later, and I was able to finish it. This book is so powerful. It's so just amazing. The one thing I love about this book is in this book you're following Hiram. He's a slave, and it's kind of following his journey with the Underground Railroad. It starts when he's a kid, so it follows his master is actually his father. So you're learning about that relationship. You're learning about he becomes a part of the Underground Railroad, and there's his journey through that and all those things. But the one thing that I really, really love about this book is it is a book that's written about slavery, but I feel like the angle that it took was different than most books you read about slavery. I felt like this book, you saw a lot of Hiram grappling with like mentally what it means to be a slave. I feel like a lot of times when you read books about slavery, it definitely goes in and talks to you about all the things slaves went through, like physically, you know, like the mistreatment, not being treated as humans. And not that that book didn't touch on this, but I feel like a lot of Hiram's journey was him trying to deal with mentally, like what it meant for him to be a slave. There was even one part where he had been free for about a year, and he was walking around, and the slave catchers, they called him Ryland's army, caught him. And it talks about how when they caught him, he was like, oh no, like they caught me, I'm gonna be sent back to the South. But part of him was like, oh, like relieved, because he was like, now I'm going back into this world that I know. At least I'm gonna be in this world where I know what's expected of me. I know how people are gonna perceive me. I know like what's gonna happen day to day. And I thought that was very interesting, because you know, you always hear about like the people who are slaves wanting to be free, but I think we never actually hear about what happens once they were free. It's just kind of like, oh, I became free, I went up north, and I had this great life. But you never hear about how like mentally or emotionally like they were affected. He's even talking about how people in there, they were the only people in their family who were free, and how they kind of felt like, wow, I have this freedom, but I can't really enjoy this life, this free life that I live, because I still have family that are not free. And there was one part in this book that I really liked. I wanted to read it to you guys. It is on page I put my sticky notes so I can find it. It's on page 186. It's the last page of chapter 14. And this is Hiram, and he's kind of, like I said, grappling with the idea of like he's truly free. And so it says, on our day out, I held these notions, and when my nerves came upon me... Okay, guys, I'm back. I'm sorry I had an interruption by my kiddos. I don't know where I was, but I'm just going to go ahead and reread it to you. So it says, on our day out, I held these notions, and when my nerves came upon me, as when procuring my ticket, as when handing my trunk to the boys stowing, as when the train pulled off and the South and everything I had known fell away, I simply told myself, this thing that must become my truth. I am free. And then underneath it, I wrote, you can be free physically, but you won't be free until you free your mind. To truly be free, you have to own your freedom and you have to walk in it. And I feel like that's what a lot of this book was just about. It was like Hiram's journey, having to realize that he was free, but he had to own it and he had to walk into it. And I just feel like that speaks so much to like me and like our life, and just like you can be in a situation where you're free from something, but sometimes if you're not free mentally, the fact that your chains are broken off of you physically means nothing, because in your mind you're still being held captive. So yes, this is a really good book. This was my first read by Ta-Nehisi Coates, and it definitely will not be my last. I love this book. It was so good. So yes, go ahead and check it out. And then the next book I read this month was Genesis Begins Again. I found this book in my library. I didn't really know much about it. I just kind of wandered into the YA section one day and I was like, let me look and see what I can find. And I pretty much picked this book up because of the cover. In this book, you are following Genesis. She is a young girl who has a family that has a lot of issues. She has a dad who's like an alcoholic, and he is an alcoholic because he has all these things from his childhood, that all these traumas that he was never healed from. And then you have her mom, she feels terrible for the dad because he's dealing with all these traumas, and she doesn't want to give up on him, but she's dealing with her own issues and traumas that had come from her family and her childhood. And then they have this daughter, Genesis, who is kind of dealing with her own traumas and dramas being a teenager. She's in the 8th grade, and kind of what that means. And she doesn't really feel like she has anyone, because she's like, I can't tell my dad about this, I can't tell my mom about this, so I'm kind of on my own. And through this book, you follow her journey. You found out that her family has a really big issue with colorism. They were really upset with her that she married her dad because he wasn't light enough. And now Genesis, as you can see, came out with very dark skin, very kinky hair. She didn't have like the loose textured wavy hair and the light skin that her mother did. And she's dealing with the feeling of not being loved. Like, her grandmother tells her the story of how when her dad came to dinner, they held up a paper bag to his face, and when they realized that he was darker than the paper bag, they told the mom, like, you should not be with him. And she defied what they told her, and she married him anyway. And so the mom is in this position where she feels like, I rebelled against my parents, I did exactly what they told me not to do, and so now I cannot give up on this man, I cannot give up on this marriage. And her father treats Genesis kind of like crap, for lack of a better word. And he's kind of dealing with his own issues with colorism, because he said if she would have just came out looking like her mother, her life would be so much easier and so much, the way she navigates life. And so throughout this book, like I said, Genesis is kind of trying to go on this journey of healing and dealing with how colorism is affecting her. And she actually finds healing kind of in an unlikely place. She moves to a new school after they are evicted for the 3rd time out of their place of living, and she becomes friends with a young girl who is Italian, and she actually has OCD, like a very bad case of OCD. And kind of through that girl's journey and another kid that she meets, he is a male and he is African American, and his family has really instilled in him just to love who he is, like who he is, how he is, and not change for anyone else. And through the friendship with those 2 children, she kind of learns to love herself, how she is and who she is, and realize like she was created the way she was created, and there's nothing wrong with her. She may not look like her mom, she may not look like her dad, but she is who she is, and she doesn't have to, just because someone has this idea of who she is because of the color of her skin, she doesn't have to let that determine how she navigates life. So this is a really good book. Like I said, it's a YA book. I'm really glad I picked it up. And I would definitely be looking into reading more books by this author, Alicia Williams. So yes, you should go check it out. And the last book I read this month is another YA book. This book actually was recommended to me on Goodreads. I don't know which other book I read, but it was like, you know how on Goodreads it'll say, if you've read this book, you should read this book. So it was recommended to me. I clicked on my want to read and kind of forgot about it. And then the other week we were going to my local library. They had math games. And when we were walking to the area where they had the math games for my kids, this book was sitting on like the display shelf, and it was like, like it called out to me. So I picked it up and I said, we're going to check this out. And I'm really, really glad I did. This is my first time reading a book by Natasha Diaz. I think this is her debut novel. So that's why it's my first time reading a book by her. And it's called Color Me In. And this one is another good book. In this book, you're following Nevaeh. And she is, once again, I feel like all my books this month were about women going on journeys. She is going on a journey of, once again, self-discovery. She is a mixed race girl. Her mom is Jamaican, and her mom's family is from the Caribbean, Jamaica and somewhere else, I can't actually remember. And then the dad's family is Jewish. So her and her mom and her dad have kind of lived this secluded life. She didn't really know much about her mom's side of the family. The dad kind of just had them in their own little world. They're very affluent. And then all of a sudden this thing happens, and all of a sudden her mom and her dad decide to split, and she has to move in with her mom's sister, which is her aunt, her uncle, and their children. They have twin daughters that are the same age as Nevaeh, and they are both African American, you know. And so she's going through this journey of being in this new neighborhood, trying to figure out who she is, because she's always known that she was mixed race, but now being amongst her mom's side of the family, not only is she trying to learn about them and figure out like, what is the mystery about this side of the family? How come I haven't been allowed to interact with them? But also trying to figure out, how do I fit into this? And the one thing that I really like about this book is the two girls that are her cousins, they're twins. And they challenge her so much to not, Nevaeh kind of lives this life where she has like a lot of self-pity. Like, because I'm mixed race and because I can definitely pass as white, a lot of times people don't know that I'm mixed. But then the people in my life who do know that I'm mixed, they're very, like the school that she goes to, the other kids are very racist. They say very problematic things. She doesn't have many friends just because she doesn't know which group she fits into. So she's kind of really trying to figure out, where do I belong? And her cousins really challenge her. Instead of like grappling with where do you belong, you put yourself where you need to be, and you use this as like a tool for change. So through like the prompting of her cousins and just like this experience, learning like what her mom had went through as a child and as a teenager, and just really learning her heritage from her cousins and her aunts and stuff, she learns that like she can use her voice for change. So she really steps into this role of just being a really bold person, and she doesn't allow like the people around her to determine who she's gonna be. She steps into this role of just, she steps into being who Nevaeh is, and not allowing the way she looks, the color of her skin, to determine how she's gonna fit in the world, to realize that there's more to her than just how she looks, you know? And so yeah, I really, really love this book. This was a really, really good read. I would definitely recommend it, and I gave it like a 5 stars. So yes, so those are all the books that I read in the month of November. Like I said, they were all really, really good books, and I didn't realize until I sat down to do this wrap up, I guess they were all mostly about women going on these journeys of kind of like self-discovery, figuring out who you are, and you know how that affects you in life. So yes, thank you guys for joining me for this November wrap up. We have one more month left in the year. I hope everyone is gonna reach their reading goals. I hope everyone had a wonderful reading month, and comment down below and let me know if you have read any of those books, if you plan on reading those books, and how your month of November reading went. And until next time, bye.